Zimzel, and it has been a tremendously long time since I've done a video. Right now I'm in the process of working on a kaiju review, but this article was shown up on several discords and was actually sent to me by a couple of you, my glorious subscribers. So I thought I'd talk about it, being that we've had 3 Godzilla games come out recently for mobile, and this whole interview here kind of talks about what's going on behind the scenes in terms of the Reiwa era and just Touhou Games, Touhou Animation, stuff like that. But so, really, what we're seeing here is obviously talking about like Run Gojira, Godzilla Destruction, and Battle Line. If people want to know how I personally feel when it comes to these 3 games, I never played the Run Godzilla game. Didn't look all that impressive to me. Destruction I did pick up, and I kind of dropped after a while. It was fun for a little bit, and then the real-time strategy game, Godzilla Battle Line, has been sort of the best out of the 3. It looked the best with the first set of trailers we got, and that's why I was really upset that it was the last game that was coming out, which makes a lot of sense because it probably had a longer development time anyway. But overall, this talks with some of the people who are behind like the dev decisions behind the games, as well as like what's been going on behind the scenes. So some of the first interviews they were talking about is like what's Touhou Games about, and of course I'm just showing everything on screen for you while I'm going to summarize it in my own words. So with Touhou Games, it's essentially going to be similar to how they're doing Touhou Animation. Well, with Touhou Animation, it's all like their animated stuff, which of course My Hero Academia is one of the things they mentioned, which of course Touhou Animation was involved with Godzilla Singular Point, and now with Touhou Games, we're going to have Godzilla games. And we also learn about something called the Godzilla Strategy Council, which is apparently just a group of Touhou members who just discuss where Godzilla goes in the future. And in regards to the Godzilla IP, they do mention Godzilla Final Wars and sort of the jump between Final Wars 2014 and then later on Shin Godzilla. So what I find, it's really interesting that this is brought up because a lot of people, especially in the fan base now, would know about the big dry spell that came from the end of 2004 to when 2014 did come out, because there's obviously a lot of rumors about when the next American Godzilla movie was coming out, whether Touhou would make any more Godzilla movies. And I'd say that that whole period between Final Wars and 2014 marred the franchise as well as the community in a sense where we were always worried about Godzilla going under again and us not really getting any new content at all for years, which hasn't been the case, especially now with 2014 kicking off the MonsterVerse, coming back and being a huge success in Japan. And now we've essentially seen some consistent Godzilla content, whether it's movies, animated shows, animated movies, now games, books, etc. There's now just a consistent amount of Godzilla content, which is more in line with other franchises such as the MCU, for example. But the idea that there is a group within Touhou who is constantly working on deciding what's going to be coming out for the future of Godzilla, and a lot of it's also talking about like in between movies. So the big goal of like Touhou Games and really Touhou Animation too, they don't say it specifically here, but it's filling in the gap. So what this tells us is that right now there may not be a film coming out for a while, and that's why we're getting Singular Point. That's why we got 3 whole mobile games. That may be why we had the anime movies. It's all of this stuff here, in the terminology here filling in the gaps, which leads me to believe that if we're getting another animated material or another kind of big project that isn't a movie, it probably means that they're working on a movie or deciding what to do when it comes to like a big live action sort of film. But they also talk about other various stuff such as music, stage, which I assume is probably like stage plays, animation, and games, of course. But that's all very well and good, and I like the fact that they're doing things to fill in the gaps, because they also talk about the difficulties of not being able to release movies year after year, which is so much more better than either the Heisei or the Millennium eras, because one of the big criticisms a lot of people have about both of those eras was that everything was getting rushed out into a 1-year timescale. Everything had to be written, directed, filmed, all of the project and everything that just goes into developing a film was being done within the course of 1 year to be released the following year, which didn't really happen a lot in the Heisei series during the start, but of course, as they try to hype everything up and keep trying to get more returns on their investments, because that was like one of the big things that hampered the Heisei series and sort of made and governed a lot of the creative decisions, comes down to like where that profit margin and what the gain was out of those films. So it's good to see that they're actually working to do things that are still profitable but aren't trying to rush films in any particular way. And one of the people who's being interviewed here, Mr. Oda, I like the fact that he's acknowledging the fans and understanding how particular and very observant the fans are. So trying to do things and keep an eye out and be cognizant of the fact that people are going to be paying attention to certain things, so be very consistent and respect the property is always a good thing. But they're also talking about smart games here. So, of course, we already know that we're getting smart games, but later on in the interview, they do talk about the possibility of us getting other kinds of games. But with smart games in general, smart games are usually generally live services, and as he describes them, they're unfinished because you're able to keep on releasing new content, doing new patches to fix bugs, balancing issues, stuff like that. But with these seasonal campaigns, sales, all that stuff, especially with the seasonal campaigns, we've already had two at this point. We've had the original Singular Point seasonal campaign, which people were able to get Godzilla Terrestrius / Ultima as a unit. We're later getting on another Singular Point campaign, which will allow us to get a SP Jaguar, I think, as a leader and, of course, as a unit. But then right now we have the Godzilla vs. Kong season campaign, which allows you to get Kong now. And, of course, we've already seen that Godzilla 2021 is going to be another unit that you can get. We're not sure if it's going to be a leader like the other Godzilla, but that is something to keep in note, is that probably they're going to be splitting the monsters, because we got two out of both these properties, SP and GVK, so it's probably going to be, at this point, it's Ultima was the first one we got, then we got Kong, we're probably going to get Jet Jaguar again in another Singular Point campaign, and then finally we'll get Legendary Godzilla as the final unit, and then we'll see what happens from there. Of course, there was a big balance change, which changed up a lot of the units, their cost, all that stuff, so right now it looks like specifically Battleline, because that's the most monetized out of the three games, is doing pretty well, and there is a development team behind that that's really paying attention and trying to issue and deal with concerns, because excuse me, I cannot talk. There's a big issue with hacking now. Of course, if you've gone on several of the Facebook groups or other groups in other places that are specifically focused on Battleline, that's started to become an issue. They've taken notice of that and are trying to find ways to ban people and sort of sort that out. But the fact that Mr. Oda just feels that games are unfinished products and they're able to keep on being iterated upon means that we're probably going to keep on getting more units, more monsters. That probably means that there's going to be more and more balance changes, and of course, being the nature that it is a monetized mobile game, it's going to incentivize more people to put more money into it, and having a whale player base for Godzilla, which really hasn't happened since probably Godzilla Kaiju Collection, which I never really knew too much about that, even though I did that one video back in the day, which I just hoped it would come into the US, which is now becoming technically a dream come true with Battleline. I'm not sure how much money was made off of that game, but in this case, there is obviously sales, and it's very much a proper mobile game in that sense. But of course, with this, they're very also happy with how Godzilla vs. Kong is doing, how Godzilla Singular Point is doing, and that's just keeping up the good atmosphere of Godzilla and sort of keeping the franchise moving along, which ties back into them trying to fill in the gaps between films and just having all of this content here released for us, which is, again, just a good thing in general. It's nice that we're continuing to expand out and we're having more just regular Godzilla content. But what's also interesting is that this is actually, I'm gonna have to keep going further down, is that how they actually got the games in general. It was that they had to do a sort of event with Google. I'm gonna scroll down here and then I'll scroll back up, because they talk about esports there, and that's gonna be fun. But what happened was that with the Google Play Indie Game Festival, which was held by Google, they helped sponsor it, and apparently the Godzilla reward was sort of what they were doing. It was how getting indie game developers apparently to work on some games. So that may explain why Destruction and Run Godzilla were not the most optimized or the most polished and fancy games out there, as they were made by indie devs. So if we have indie people working on games, that may attract more people to be like, well, we've given the rights to a small indie team, so now let's give it to a AAA team, which if I want to scroll back up there, if I can find it. But they talk about esports and moving into possibly making console games. Of course, this is nothing definitive. Take everything I'm saying here with a grain of salt, and of course, take everything that I'm saying in terms of what is said here even with a grain of salt, because this is all translated from English to Japanese. Google translated Japanese to be more specific. But I'll read this quote out here specifically. We launched Touhou Games because we want to deliver games that make Godzilla feel closer to us, so as not to disappoint Godzilla fans. That's awesome. I like that. Support the fans. Always a good thing to do. And in the future, even in the direction that Touhou is good at, we will think about what we can do, such as esports competitions, 70 theaters nationwide, collaborations with entertainers in our office, and having people involved in movies and music work on game materials. Also, we are not particular about smartphones. This is the key here. Just saying smartphone games first in the future. I would like to study how to bring out the charm of Godzilla and make console games. Please try playing the 3 apps. That'll be the first step. This right here is probably the most important line that can be taken away from this whole interview, is that this Mr. Oda here really understands that maybe not all the console Godzilla games were good, and he really wants to bring out like what people like about Godzilla and put it into a well-developed console game. But in this case, what he's doing with smartphones first, it makes sense because so many people have smartphones that's going to be reaching a wider audience than a console game will, even though consoles are still a big market. But with this, like, please just try to play the 3 apps. I've played Destruction here and there. Battleland's the main one I'm playing, and then Run Godzilla I haven't really even tried. But even if you're not playing all 3 games, play one of them. It shows where they should be putting more of the focus on. If you're not playing Run, play Destruction. If you don't like Destruction or Run, play Battleland. That's what I'm doing. So it's important to sort of have you be there and give them numbers so they know kind of what's up. But the rest of this comes down to some of the devs who were working on the other games. Later down the line, they're talking right here, this is about Godzilla Destruction. They don't really mention much about sort of updating it. It's mostly just sort of like what their intentions were with the games and how they wanted to design it. But this right here, this is when they started talking about like further on towards Battle Line. So with this, they wanted to point out a lot of stuff where, like this line specifically, at this point in time, I think that Godzilla monsters like Heisei Godzilla vs. series enthusiasts will come to mind. It just kind of is highlighting there's a lot of Heisei monsters in the series, and then they talk about the collaboration with Godzilla vs. Kong, and they keep looking to add more stuff into the future. And they also talked earlier about how they wanted to add things to the game, but they didn't in the initial iteration. That's what the specific term they use. So we may see stuff that they didn't have at first be introduced a lot later, which is good, because if there is one criticism that I have about the game, it's a really lacking like unit support. There's still a lot of units, but I think that the more units we have and the more varied their abilities are, we can see this game becoming more and more popular. And of course, dealing with issues like the hacker problem is important. But there's also other stuff here talking about like game music, and this is mostly about Godzilla Run, which again, it's fun, but it's not something I really much care about. But the final line here, in the future, Godzilla games and Touhou games, but now it is not the goal. In the future, we will elaborate various directions and launch a wide variety of games, so please look forward to our future. I'm very happy that they're focusing on trying to find more Godzilla games for us to play, and they're dedicated to sort of updating the games they already have and seeing what can be done in terms of like padding out time between more films. So it seems that Godzilla's got a pretty bright future ahead of it, and I'm happy, and I hope you guys are happy. I'm going to leave a link to this article in the description, and I'm using this on Google Chrome. That's going to be the easiest way for it to be translated for you if you want to read it for yourself, or if you want to read Japanese because you are that much of a weeb, be my guest. But as always, guys, I'm Zimzilla, and I'll see you guys next time.